Hey there, welcome to Standard Operating Procedure, the Cafe Tele live broadcast, where I'll show you tips, tricks, techniques, and tactics to love a career in telecoms. Today, we're going to be reviewing the offset function in Microsoft Excel. Offset is a really handy way to create ranges that are used by other functions. Offset allows you to define those ranges based on other things going on inside your worksheet or elsewhere in the workbook. It's a really handy tool, so let's get started. I'm your host, Russell Lundberg, and today we're going to be looking at some examples. First, I'm going to show you the syntax of the offset function, and how's that look? Super. Here's the offset function. The syntax is a reference, the row offset, the column offset, the height in rows, and then the width in rows. So there's 5 arguments. The first one is always, think of it as the starting point for your function, starting point for the range that offset is going to create for you. How we doing? Can you hear me okay? If you have any problems, send me a chat message so that I can see what's going on. Okay, back to, let's see, I've got to share. Hang on. I'm going to share my workbook. And it's just easier if I share my entire screen. And then let me get over to Excel. There we go. Okay, so hi Nishant, how you doing? Thanks for joining. Okay, here's the offset function. Offset takes 5 arguments and it returns a range. Most of the time, you'll use offset to provide a range to some other function. Offset is a dynamic function, meaning things going on inside of your workbook can influence the range offset's going to create for you. So here's some examples real quick. So there's the syntax right there at the top of the screen. And so let's see, can you see that all right? That's 140%. So there's an example without the equal sign. So the range, the reference, up here's the reference, right? So the reference is C22. That's the blue cell right there. And then a 0 row offset, that means it's in the same row. A 0 column offset, same column, and no row and no height. So since I put nothing there, it defaults to be the same as the reference. So that's just returns the same starting point, C22. Here in the next example, if I make a 1 in the row offset, now that's C23. It moves down 1 row. That would be here. Okay, and if I change that 1 to a 5 row offset, that'd be C27. And it works the same way with columns. My reference is still cell C22 with a 1 column offset. That's going to be cell D22. And here with a 10 column offset, I typed that badly. No, that's a 10. That is a 10 column offset. That's right. So that's not D32. I did this bad. I did this wrong. So it's still going to be row 22, but it's 10 columns to the right. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's going to be O22. See, I made a mistake. And that's because the column offset was 10 columns from our reference starting point. Here we go. And now, let's see, I changed the wrong one again. This is O22. That's going to be way out here, right? Okay, and then last, if I change both of them, if I row offset of 4 and a column offset of 3, so there's on starting point, row offset of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Column offset of 3, 1, 2, 3. So that should be G. I just can't do anything right today. G26. Here you go, G26. Right there. 1, 2, 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. Honestly, most of the time when I use offset, I just leave those row offset and column offset values as 0. Most of what I do is a dynamic named range. We've covered those before. I'll talk about that just real quickly, yeah? Okay, so that's how the offset values work. And then height, so there's a height of 1, there's a height of 2, 3, 4. It's just how many rows are this, do you want the range to be? And then the width is the same thing in columns. There's width of 2, width of 3, width of 4, etc. That's just simple way how it works. Check my notes here. I should also say, you need to think about there are times when your reference is more than one cell. So if here's my reference, what is that? 6 cells, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like 8 cells, right? And if I use that as my reference and do a column offset of 1, it'll select that. It'll shift the whole reference by 1. Or if I do a row offset of 1 and a column offset of 1, it'll move over and down. Like that. Sometimes you use this because you might define a range like this as a starting point, but you want some other column in this example, some other column, but you need the same kind of range. Think of it like this. I'm going to undo that coloring. What if this is a bunch of dates, right? What is today? 2/21. So maybe these are the days and I have values. So I could define this as the horizontal axis in a chart, and I could define the vertical axis as just an offset from my dates. That's pretty cool because that way you can control one range and other ranges will change because they're defined based on that first range. It's kind of hard to do an example of, but it's something I do frequently. That very same example where the dates are the horizontal axis, but they're in a column like this, and I'll define the values as an offset from this range, especially if I'm using a dynamic named range. So let's do that now. Let's do a dynamic named range because that's one of the most common things we do. So I'll come over here. I should say I use an Apple computer, a Mac, and the Microsoft products are pretty broken on Mac. They don't work the way they're supposed to. They certainly don't work, not all of them work the same way as they do on Windows. So if you use a Windows computer, you've got it much easier. They work the way they're supposed to. Excuse me. Okay. A dynamic named range. So I'm going to go into the name manager. This is the formula on the ribbon bar, and then define name. Figures already got a bunch defined here. So I'm going to, I think if I precede it with an underscore, it'll pop into the top of the list here. So I would say my starting point, I'm just going to use this. And then a 0 row offset, a 0 column offset, a 0 column offset. But a dynamic range, normally I use this with a table that I'm continually adding data to. Maybe in this example, every day I add a new row of data, or every week or every month I upload new data to this worksheet, my dynamic named range will automatically take that into consideration. Okay. All right. So there's my offset. So for the dynamic part of this, I'm going to define this as just the count function. And although I've typed these out, the way Excel saves dates as a number, the number of days since January 1 of 1900. So these are, although they look like 21-Feb, underneath the formatting, it's just an integer number, right? So I can use count. Count returns the number of cells in its range that have a numeric value. Okay, so since I don't have any other data in column I, here's the simple way to do this. Column I, and then I'll close that out. That's the simple way to do that because, again, I said, as I continue to add data, I want count to change as the number of rows of data increases. And that way I'm always expanding this range based upon what I want, right? And then the last argument to the offset is the column offset, excuse me, the column width. And I'm okay with 1. I'll just, since my reference is 1 column wide, I can just ignore it and close it out, close out the parenthesis. And if I add that, and remember our test is if you click inside the range of cells you've defined, Excel will put little flashing lights around the range that's selected. So there you go, right? Now I got to close that. Now if I add a date, the next date is going to be 1 March, right? Now, if I, again, look at my range and click inside, it grew by 1. It grew by 1 because there's 1 extra cell, 1 extra row that has an integer value. 1 March is an integer value. Remember, the count of days since January 1, 1900, that's how Excel keeps track of dates internally, okay? Okay, so that's really important to know, and that's how you define a dynamic named range. So what I said we do is the way I typically use that, there's my range, and let's say here's the data. It doesn't matter. But now I want to define this as a range based upon my original range. So let's do that. Oops, sorry about that. Right. So back into the name manager, and I'm going to derived. Let's just call it derived because that's what we're going to do. And again, it's my offset function. But now the reference is my earlier range. So underscore test1. It's a 0 row offset, but now it's the column to the right. So it's a positive 1 column offset. And I've already defined the height in rows in my first range, so I can just ignore that. And the height, the width in columns, same thing. I can just ignore that, so I can close that out. Does that make sense? So by putting the comma there, I'm leaving space for the argument, but by putting no value for that argument, Excel defaults to whatever it was to begin with, and that's defined by the test function. That's not going to work because that'll work though. Sorry, I don't know how I made that mistake. So now my named range called derived, underscore derived, we'll make it an uppercase just to keep a convention, is defined based upon the named range test1, but it's shifted over to the right 1 column. So let's add that. And if I click inside of it, didn't work. Why didn't that work? Oh, let's figure that out. Always important. I don't know why that didn't work. Here's the problem with using Excel on Mac is if it doesn't work, it's hard to know, are you doing something wrong? Or you can see why it didn't work. Hey, Russell, it's underscore test 1. But it's hard to know because it's broken, because Excel is so broken on Apple. It's hard to know, am I making a mistake or is it Microsoft? In this case, I made a mistake. I didn't prepend that underscore. If I try again, and now I click in here, it selects my column. So this would be great for a chart. I could put this name range, test 1, underscore test 1, as the horizontal axis. Oh, let's just go ahead and do it. Has no meaning because it's just made up data, right? But I can mess with this now. Select data. And again, here's something that's broken about Excel on a Mac. The way you enter its I made a mistake. Is you put the named range. I'm doing this from memory, so it might not be good. My workbook here is SOP. This is the screwy part. Space Octothorpe 22-OFFSET .XLSX. See if that'll work, and then I'm just going to copy and paste that so I don't have to type it again. Reference is not valid. SOP. Oh. See how kludgy this is? This is because of it. It's simply because it's broken. Microsoft Office is broken. And that's bang and then underscore. What was it? Derived? Seems like that worked, yeah. If I change a value here. Okay, so it automatically changed. And now if I add a range, see if this works. 3/2. A value. Cool, huh? So again, you can see how that works. I really want to point that out. That wasn't what I really wanted to show today, but that's a very simple demonstration of the only way I know of to automatically extend what a chart will show you. It's easy to show a window that moves along as you add data. You can do that. That's really simple. But to actually, what I just did was add another data point inside. Let's do it again. So 2/3, March 2nd is the last data point. I don't know if Excel will do this, but just to make it a little more clear. Sure, Excel did that for us. Thanks, Excel. If I add another day, see right now the last one is March 2 or 2nd March of this year. And now if I do 3/3, it adds a value, adds a new data point. How about that, huh? Pretty cool. Now that's this is the only way I know of to extend a series in a chart. So the way I typically use this is if I want to show a historical chart that every time data gets added, like for a dashboard, I use this so that my historical chart keeps getting bigger. And you saw it's automatic. So if I add this data into my data table, the chart will grow all by itself. I didn't have to manually adjust that. I didn't have to come in and edit my series up here. I don't have to edit the series because it's a named range and it's dynamic. So there's a really handy thing. You may have questions about that, but that's really just one of the ways to use offset. So checking my notes here. I've shown you now the dynamic named range. A more common way to use a dynamic name range would be to set the print area as a dynamic named range. Now, if you've ever done any programming, you know that a lot of programming languages will have reserved words. So like, if in C or Python, I suppose, a case or a switch statement, you can't use case or switch inside your programming as a variable name because that's reserved as a function inside the language. Well, Excel has reserved words as well, and here's one. It's called print. So, for example, if I wanted to print this table, I'd come here and I would set it print area. I would set the print area. Can you see that okay? It's not very, very big, but I could set the print area to be the same size as my data, right? And then when I come into my name manager, I will have a variable here or a range name called print area. And it's just this worksheet and the range. But I could make that a dynamic named range. In fact, we already know how to do that, right? Just like we did before. Siri on my phone is talking to me. That happens. Okay, so my print area, we already defined the test one was the column of dates. We're going to use that. So it's offset open, and then underscore test one. And then I don't want a row offset. I don't want a column offset. I just want to keep the same height as test one. So I can just default that by putting no value. But now I want the width to be 2 columns. So I get both columns. So that will be 2. So now instead of being the same width columns wide as underscore test one, it'll be 2 columns wide. And if I click there, you can see it. I'll click over here so the highlighting doesn't confuse us. And now if I formula, my name manager, and I click inside the print area right there. So now I know if I wanted to print this, it's going to print this area. So this is really handy, taking advantage of our dynamic named ranges and the fact that print underscore area is a reserved word inside of Excel. I can set the print area maybe to be a table, and as the size of that table changes, I don't have to come in here and reset the print area. It's automatically set for me. There's another way to save your time, dynamically setting the print area. I learned how to do that one year I was doing a budget. And if you've ever been part of a budget as a manager, budgets every year are over and over and over and iterate, and you go over it many, many, many times. And normally you're meeting with the leadership in your group or your organization or the senior management, depending on what your role is. And you'll print these all out, like for your PowerPoint or for handouts to everybody. And every time you iterate, you're going to have multiple printouts probably. And so by setting this dynamic print area, I saved myself a lot of time every time we iterated on that budget. So this is another very useful technique. Automate the setting of your print area. You set it one time based upon the range, the test one underscore test one print area. There was my This is the one where we actually defined this column. Yeah. And then everything else, the derived, underscore derived, and print area, those are both defined based upon this test one. So it's a great way to save yourself lots of time. And once you set up the first one, the other named ranges that build on that are very simple. Okay. So let's see, you want to keep going here. Checking my notes. So I wanted to show the example of a rolling average. And a rolling average is, this is some data. Yeah, I can't show this very well, but this is just data from the World Health Organization. For a while, I was saving data related to the number of new cases in the pandemic, just for curiosity. And it seemed like everybody defined that differently. You know, some people would show a 7-day rolling average or a 14-day rolling average. And so I figured out a way that you could make everybody happy. Somebody says, hey, I want a 3-day rolling average. You type a 3. And now it's a 3-day rolling average. And you can see, you know, it's very, very spiky and it's not very flat, not a smooth curve. That's the purpose of a rolling average, is really to average out, to smooth out some of those spikes and bumps. So here's a 7-day rolling average, right? That's a lot smoother, right? And notice it also changes here inside the title. Let's go to a 14-day rolling average. And one more thing I want you to notice is here's my data. I forget which one I'm using. Okay, here's my data, this column P. Yeah. And as I change the length of the roll, 3 days, see how this adjusts? Now there's only 3 days of no data. If I change this now to 10 days, now I have 10 days of no data. So normally, so let's go forward. That's how it works, right? This is the finished product. Let's set this up. So I'm going to come back to my worksheet for today, and I'll move this out of the way. And let's come to the data. So this is just data, and here is the default. I simply charted this column. So what I want to do is, let's say I want to do a 3-day rolling average, okay? Three-day rolling average. Well, normally you'd say, well, 1, 2, 3. So this would be the first day equals average. And then it's new cases. So I do that, right? There's my average value. And then I'd fill down. I use the shortcut there. Double click on that little thing in the corner. That's the fill handle. If you double click that, and it's next to a column of numbers, it will automatically fill down as long as there's numbers in the adjacent column. So I can skip ahead. What happened there? Okay. That's probably just a mistake. It should have gone all the way down. So let's try it again. Double click right there in that corner. Can you see that okay? That's as big as I can make it. Okay, now it fills all the way down. A little too far, actually. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so if I want to chart that rolling average, I can just add that to my chart. Where's my chart? Oh, sorry. I need to come to the chart. Chart design and select data. I'm going to add there. And my Y values are and if I don't put data in the X-axis, it'll already default to what the chart is already using. So let's just click that. And just to make this a little cleaner, I'm going to get rid of this for now. And is that my 3-day average? So it's smoothed out a little bit if it's starting the same place. See, it won't start the same place exactly. Looks like I didn't do that quite right. Let's have another look at that. I'll fix this error. And chart design, select data, 3-day rolling average. So for some reason, it's all the way down at H104. I want to start at H2. Again, I'm not going to take responsibility for that. I'm gonna blame Excel being broken on the Mac. Okay, so it looks a little bit better, yeah? And it's smoother. I think that's the key thing. And if I go to that, well, I can't go at 7-day average because it's hard-coded. Every cell has this same 3-cell range. So normally, I guess if you wanted a 7-day average, you'd create a new column. So let's fix that. Let's use the offset function, okay? And instead of that, I'm going to start where I am, E2, but that's my reference. And I want 0 rows offset, 0 column offset. My height though, so my height is 3. It's a 3-day rolling average. Let's height of 3. And my width is the same as my reference point, right? So I'll just default that. I can just, yeah, there you go. Except that's the offset function. And I'm going to feed that. So that still shows the 3-day average. I'm going to anchor the column so I can illustrate better. And now, so there's the function I've used. Inside of the parentheses for average is the offset function. Offset returns a range. Average uses that range to calculate the average. So now I get the same value, right? Now let's try it again. But instead of this 3 being hard-coded, see, here I am at fourth row, but I hard-coded starting at E2. That's not quite right. What I really want to do is, I'm on row 4. I want to do that. So let's do E4. And then my rows offset is going to be minus, it's -2 in this case. But because I'll do the 2 first. And so that works properly. I got a different value though. 1, 2. I got to check this real quick. I got 63,000. I don't think that's what I should have. And I'm checking the average is 43. The average is 56. The average, I'm looking for that 63,000. Because it, offset, I'm at E4. Sorry. What did I do wrong? I want a -2. So I can get this value 63 if I offset by 2 and then click 3. So 63137, you can read it at the bottom of the screen, and that's what I have here. So my mistake was, instead of a 2, it's a -2. And now, once again, it's that 56,000. That's what I expect. But one improvement to that, remember what I showed you before, is by changing this value here, I could change what my average, how far the rolling average, how many days was in the rolling average. And I can do that, but I want to have I want to have, since I've got a 3 out here, I want a 3 here. So I'm going to make that -3 + 1. That works just fine. Now if I still get the same thing. It's still my 3-day rolling average, same values. Now I'm going to define, so call it rolling days. Ooh, it's there's already a bunch of stuff defined here, so let's call it underscore rolling days. And I'm going to copy that, and that's going to be this cell right here, underscore rolling days. And now I've got a named range called underscore rolling days. Let's replace that 3. Function F3 is my shortcut, underscore rolling days. And here's function F3, underscore rolling days. It's going to break because there's no value here. Okay, that's what I want. Now if I fill down, now I still have the same 3-day rolling average, but it's defined. You can see, let's do that again. It's defined with my rolling days named range. And now I can change this. But I get some errors. Now it's a lot smoother. You see how much smoother that is? If I go to 10 days, even better, then it's a pretty smooth line. But I have these errors. Well, what's causing those errors is offset is returning a range that starts with a negative cell row, right? Because I'm starting at E4, right here, E4, row 4, but I offset -9. 10 days minus 10 plus 1 is -9. And I can't use negative numbers. So now you can build in some flexibility. And this is actually an Excel best practice. Excel wants all the formulas in one contiguous block. Excel wants those all to be exactly the same. Now, I say exactly the same, but you can see even this one, it's E9, E10, E11, E12, right? But that's just the only difference there I can create with a fill handle. It's the fill series. So Excel still sees that as one. It's all the same formula. You just changed that sequential row count or column count, right? So how can we make this go away? Well, if the offset, the rows offset is going to give me a 0 or less row number, let's hide that. So how to do that? Well, remember in a previous lesson, we did the rows function. There's the row function. It's just a range. And we don't need an offset here because it's a pretty simple range. I'm just going to do an if statement, equals rows. Range, I'm going to use an anchored range. I'm going to start at, well, for this cell, I'm just going to start at E2, but it's anchored. So function F4, I'm going to anchor the row and then colon and E2. So rows returns the count of rows inside its argument. So this is E2 to E2. So argument is 1. So it returns 1. So it's an if statement. I'm going to cheat here for a second. I'm going to fill that. Now I'm just going to wrap it in this if statement. If rows E2 function F4. Yeah, it doesn't like that. You have to come back. E2 is less than my rolling days. I'll explain this in a second. Let me get it entered. It didn't do it. I want that, comma, do nothing, comma, then let me close out my if statement. What do we got there? See if that's okay. So I want it to be blank. So if I set that to 3, how about 4? Yeah. And there's my if statement. If I fill that down, well, that's not what I wanted. If the count of rows is less than do nothing, instead of figuring this out, let me go back to my other one. I already sorted this. If the count of rows less than or equal to the day count, okay. Well, that doesn't quite seem right. Oh, yeah, of course not. I have to anchor this because it wouldn't let me anchor it while I was still typing. Now it's E2. Mo better. So if I do that as a 3, this was the raw. If I do this as 1, it should exactly mirror the source data. Not quite right, yeah? I mean, it's exactly mirroring the source data, but my equal is not right. So I think the problem is we start out on row 2 and it returns a 1. So I probably have to have that embedded in here. And now as a 2, I get no errors, right? And it starts to diverge. Getting better. Cleaner still. There you go. Pretty smooth little line, yeah? At 2 weeks. Awesome. Nice smooth line. So now, only one correction I would make here, and so you can see, here's where it kicks in after 13 days. So the way I've done this is today's value is part of today's average, right? So here's 68,000. That's the average of these 14 days, right? 73.85 down here, 73.85 in the cell here, right? If you don't like that, you have to do a -1 offset, right? So this average is the 14 days previously. Up to you. I don't think, especially when you're looking at a long interval like 14, doesn't matter much. But there is one fix. The column still says 3 days. Yeah, the header. We don't want that. It's now 14 days. So really we want our header column to change as this changes. So let's do this. We're going to use the concatenation operator. Remember that? We covered that in a previous modeling session. The concatenation operator, it's function F3. I want this rolling days. And then there's the concatenation operator. The ampersand is the concatenation operator. And now I want the rest of that text. So now this changes. The column heading changes as I change this average. It's a 3-day rolling average, or it's a 7-day rolling average. And I always like to put something like that in my title. So let's change this a little bit. I need a title. Chart design. add chart element, chart title, above chart, and let's just make it is new cases. Close the quote, ampersand. There's my rolling days, ampersand, quote, minus day rolling average. Oops, close the parentheses there. New cases and parentheses. I think it's right. And underscore rolling days. And sure looks good to me. Is it just that? Okay, so it's just that. Ampersand. Where was that? Oh, I know what it is. Oops. This simple thing here is it's inside the chart title. So normally, if I want to have a dynamic chart title, is I'll create it in a cell and then I'll link the chart title to that cell. So let me show you what I mean is equals quote, new cases, space, open parentheses, and now ampersand, rolling days, ampersand, quote, dash, days, rolling so there's my, sorry, I can get away from this now. There's my title, right? And let's do this equals, and I always like blue, matches my eyes. There you go. And now as I change, my chart title changes. About that. Now, there is one more thing you could do, and that is this range. Remember, I hard-coded this range. If I look at the table, chart design, select data, my 14-day rolling average, it's hard-coded. Well, because it's dynamic, you know, every time we change the number of rolling days, I'd want to start at a different point. And I think I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you to work on. If you've got a question, you can DM me or send me an email or something. I didn't practice that. If I try and do it for you here live, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes and confuse you. If you make those same mistakes yourself, that'll help you learn. So rather than just confuse you, I want you to try and do that. So the problem we've got here is because it's dynamic. So with 14 days as a rolling average, you don't get a value in the first 13 days, but you've got 13 dates here. So you get this little ugly spike. And there's two problems. One, you want to eliminate that spike, but you still want the range to begin on the proper date. So if you just change your range to be the dates with values, it's going to start over here on March 24th rather than on April 7th about. And has to be dynamic. I mean, that part you can do. You know how to do that now. But the part I don't remember. I just have to trial and error like you're going to have to try to make sure I can start the data to display right there where it's not 0, and also move around as we change the number of days. You got that? I better come back and see how everybody's doing. Mario Botello, how you doing? You like that, huh? Thanks. I appreciate that. It's good. It's a really nice technique. Offset is great, especially when you use it with dynamic named ranges to create dynamic named ranges. So like in this case, I got bored with this last August. 6 months ago, I had enough of this. I couldn't do it anymore. But technically, every day there's new data. You can go to, what's the website? Let's go. Well, here's a COVID website. This is a COVID website. I think it's hosted by Johns Hopkins University. I forget who set this up, but this is where I got a lot of my data. And you can see how they charted it. Hey, the good news is things are actually getting better, both in the US and in the world. Good thing there, yeah. It's still a horrible disease. But this was just the data set I used to kind of sharpen that rolling average. So any questions? I sure appreciate you guys joining me. Let me give you the link to the, I always post these to our YouTube channel. Here we go. Here's the Cafe Tele YouTube channel if you don't already have it. And if you'd like to get an email ahead of time, like usually on Saturday, I'll send out an email saying, hey, I'm going to go live on Sunday. If you want that email, you can also, after this broadcast, I will edit the video and upload it to YouTube, and then I'll send you an email with a link to this spreadsheet that I've just created, so you get what we just developed together. This Excel. Yeah. You can download this workbook and take it from there. Yeah. I think that's about it. Do you have any more questions? Anything? We're just shy of an hour, just not quite a full hour yet. If you want to ask a question, I'll take. Let's see. Here's the link. There's the link to get the email. You can sign up for the email. You have to give me your email address, but I just use it at the weekends for this. It's not, I don't send spam. It's all telecoms all the time. Okay, any questions, guys? Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing. Now it's just me. Any questions? Can I handle your questions? If you are working on some kind of model or trying to automate one of your reports, send me an email or DM me. I'm everywhere. LinkedIn, Facebook, Telegram, WhatsApp, all that stuff. Reach out to me and let's talk. I'd love to try and help you with whatever you're working on. I think that would be very instructive. I think other people might want to see that because they're probably working on the same kinds of things. And most of my examples are made up. If you had a real world example, we can kind of tweak the data so that nobody would, there's nothing revealing. You wouldn't give away any proprietary data about what you're doing. But reach out to me and I'm happy to work with you to first give you an automated report or a model, and second, help other people learn these techniques. No, Nishant, for adjusting the initial date. So you've obviously looked at some of the earlier modeling. The initial date, though, is just the date function. See, I better share first. I can show you that. That's an easy one. Share. I'm going to come back to this, the Excel workbook, and I'll variable start date. Is that kind of what we're talking about? Variable start date. So here's your start date. And I'm going to make that a named range. Why does it jump back to that? I'm going to close this. And now, and I better make it a format that as a date. Better expand it. Yeah, Nishant, I think that was maybe, 18 or 19, but it's pretty simple. So 2/21, there's the date, right? And so here's your date function. The year argument, month argument, and day argument. And the way we did that was with the date function equals date. It's the year, year. Take the year out of your start date, and then close that. And then the month from your start date. Now you get the same thing. And then if you want to see if I copy that now, the fill handle doesn't really help me because there's nothing incrementing. But here's where you'd use your columns argument to increment. Every time you increase a column, add to the day or month. So if I add I'll do it here. If I add to the day argument, plus rows, I'm on EFG, G9, function F4. Subtract 1, so that first one is correct, right? So now you'll get day at a time incrementing. Oh, G9 to G. What? Oh, it's columns. And then as I go to the right, now my day increments. That's super, Nishant, helping you with your daily tracker. I'm glad that helped. That makes me feel good. And like you said, you can go back to SOP 18 or 19 to get that. Same thing would work here if you wanted to do it. Let's say you wanted to do it by, say by months. I would take this out and I'm going to go up and down. So it'll be the rows function. So your month, right? Plus, now it would be rows. And I'm in G still, G10, minus 1. So there's still my first month, but now it should increment the month at a time. March, April, May, June, July. Yeah. Pretty straightforward stuff. If you're doing a daily tracker, Nishant, you could try this, although day at a time, it gets pretty, after a month, you got 30 extra data points, but where the range is dynamic, every day you automatically add another data point into your chart. Yeah. What would be cool if you're using your daily tracker properly is daily implies you're getting new data every day, is just add to it a weekly summary. So that's something you'd have to think about. Or, if it's daily, in 6 months, you'd have 6 months. You'd have 26 weeks or 6 months. So it's the same data, but you can set up to have really a report is just a view. So the proper way to configure your workbooks would be all the data is, the data you import every day or you add every day. That's make that on one worksheet. And then your daily tracker would be like a dashboard that just shows the day at a time from that data. But you could have another report, another worksheet that does week at a time. It's the same data, and you'll have to roll it up by week, but it's easy to do. And remember, the data, it's always the same data. You don't have to mess with the data. You just keep adding it day by day, and your day at a time tracker will progress, and your week at a time tracker, your monthly tracker, day, week, month. These are just different views of that same underlying data set, that daily data set. You have a daily view, a weekly view, and a monthly view. But it's all the same data, and if you do it right, all you do every day is just add that new data, and probably you refresh your pivot table, and everything else just flows right through. So if you're interested in that and it's not clear how to get there, send me an email and we can work together on that. I'd love to see you having something that you really like and something that's really sexy and automated like that. Okay, excuse me, I need a breath. All right, that's it for this time. Nishant, thanks so much. Mario, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next time right here on Standard Operating Procedure.